little exercise of things we know and things that haven't been decided yet
Sure.
on both sides of the ball. So we'll start with the offense, and with the offense comes the quarterback situation. I know you had some stuff to say about that on Monday. Right now, it's still it seems like the name we continue to hear the most is Alex Orji, but at the same time, you're not really hearing news of anyone running away with it just yet.
No, and he's made a lot of mistakes, been very inconsistent. Even those who are in a position to be mouthpieces of the program are saying the same thing, that, he's got to make the easy plays too, man. There are times that he gets out of the pocket, he'll make an outstanding play, throw the ball down the field. More than anything, we're hearing about a lack of explosive plays. And the one really comment that stood out to me yesterday from a guy at practice was getting first downs is a win right now for this offense against this defense, because that's how good the defense is. So the good news is they're going against one of the best defenses in the country, fellas. The bad news is a couple of guys have been banged up on the offensive line and haven't played a whole heck of a lot. The quarterbacks, in my opinion, and I've said it all along, they're probably going to have to go to the portal and find somebody in that late portal period, because I just don't see the starting quarterback of a championship team on this team. And you would hate to waste a defense like that on a guy, you'd hate to be Iowa-esque, I guess is what I would call it. So the offensive line is going to be better. And I don't mean they're going to be as bad as Iowa. There's no way. They got better backs. They got a better offensive line. But you want a quarterback that can throw a little bit too. And I don't think they have that right now. And I don't think Jack Tuttle's the answer either. Everybody talks about, well, he's hurt, he's going to come back. Jack Tuttle couldn't earn the starting job at Indiana. He's in his 7th year now. He still hasn't started anywhere. Why do we expect him to be the savior of this program, or the guy that's going to lead this program to a potential Big Ten title? So that's my concern. I think the receivers, from what we've heard, are playing well. You can go for more details at thewolverine.com in our report today. But that defense, guys, is nasty. And there's Max Bredesen, who is having one hell of a spring as well.
Yeah, the 5 receivers on the roster playing well. I think they got to maybe add some there as well. A couple of the freshmen, both of them coming in the summer. But I think, I don't think there's any danger and I know you just said it too, of being Iowa. But I think there's danger of maybe being a 2017 Michigan offense where you just didn't have any juice to it. And first downs did feel like a win. And I mean, that, granted, they had issues with health at quarterback, but looking at the numbers again, like Grant Perry led the team in receiving with like 300 yards. It just wasn't. And there was that long stretch they had without a passing touchdown to a wide receiver. Most of them were to the tight ends. I think Sean McCune was second in receiving with like right around 300 as well. Like, there are more weapons on this Michigan team than there was on that 2017 Michigan team. But you just don't want to get in the territory without a great quarterback of kind of having to rely on a defense that was great. But I mean, would you guys agree? Like they wasted that defense in 2017.
100%. Yeah, and you don't want that to happen again. And there's no reason for them to. You know what? You should be back channeling right now. And I don't care about whose feelings get hurt. With all due respect to guys like Alex Orji, who they tried to make a kick returner at the beginning of the year, right? And tried to find different ways to get him on the field. You've got to. You owe it to all your other guys on this team to field the best quarterback that you can. And I do think he's out there, and everybody says, well, who are you going to find? And you're just going to get somebody's leftovers. Yeah. Like a Jake Rudock, maybe, who came in and threw for 3,000 yards. And everybody's like, well, you're going to be giving up that Texas game if you don't go with a guy that's already here. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, that's a home game. And the new quarterback, if he comes in, is going to have one under his belt. Right. Number 2, they're not starting at Utah like Rudock did. They're not starting at Notre Dame like Shea Patterson did, for example. So, and if you find the right guy and let him bust his ass over the summer to learn that offense and work with those receivers, it certainly can work. So that to me is the play. They need to be right now back channeling and figuring out who that's going to be. Tell kids, hey, you want to come and play for a Big Ten champion who 3 times in a row and a national champion with a defense that is going to get you the ball back often, early and often. This is the place for you.
Yeah, the thing of it too is that it's not outside of Jaden Davis, who I think in time can be a Cade McNamara type or a Shea Patterson type. It's not. There's a conversation on our board earlier where people are like, well, what would be the harm in just throwing him out there? And it's not just as simple as, oh, well, just get him experience and he learns. Like there's the whole different level of the game. There's processing speed. There's improving your pocket presence. There's improving your athleticism, which is something we've heard that, Michigan wants to do with him behind the scenes. So, again, it takes time. I just imagine he's probably on ice this year. And, if you to me, that would be waving the white flag on what you think this team could do. Is, oh, well, just because we don't have a quarterback, let's just have it be a lost year where we get a guy some reps. There's a lot of good talent even on offense, even though a lot of these guys didn't play a ton last year. You still have a window here to attack this and make a push for a Big Ten title. See how you'd fare in a 12-team playoff. So, I've kind of been looking around at some of these other schools with quarterback battles, and there's not a whole lot of intel out there in terms of who guys might be. But yeah, I mean, if you're a guy at a school that is in a quarterback battle with like an upperclassman guy who is in a battle with, a 5-star recruit or something like that, and you can just come in and be a steady presence. Like, I like the Jake Rudock comparison. I think that the overtures should be made that, hey, you don't have to battle it out with these guys that these coaches on the hot seat are going to be pressured to play if they don't win right away. Like, come here, compete for a Big Ten title, play for a defending national champion, and we'll see if they can't even get you to the NFL too.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that guy's out there. Go find him, fellas. And you know what? You can worry about your guys going into the portal too. But at the same time, like I said, you owe it to your team to get the best guy out there. And yeah, we would all like to see the next JJ McCarthy and that guy that they are growing within the program, recruiting him and kind of grooming him. But that's not the case. It just hasn't happened. And it's tough. It is tough to recruit a guy to follow JJ McCarthy. All these guys want to play early. Look at Dante Moore. Look at every one of them. But there are schools where there's going to be a number 2 guy that's going to be like, I can go to Michigan and I can start. And really, they need to start laying that groundwork right now.
All right. Well, other takeaways on the offensive side of the ball. Seems like Clayton, earlier today, we talked to Josh Preeb, so we finally got some clarification on the correct pronunciation of that name, but not a whole lot to glean in terms of, we try to get maybe what those offensive line combos have looked like, but Josh Preeb seems like he's fit in real well. Sounds like he's been one of their better offensive linemen during this spring camp so far. Max Bredesen is a guy who I think they're going to ask him to do pretty much whatever it takes. Maybe be that fullback, H-back type of guy while also playing some tight end. Any other takeaways on offense from the last few weeks? I feel like running back, Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, it's pretty clear that's the 1A, 1B that's being repped right now. I know there's been some hype for Ben Hall, but to me, it's pretty clear those two guys are pretty firmly entrenched up there. Any other takeaways from this roster as we head into the meat and potatoes of spring camp?
A little concerned about tackle just because I wasn't enamored with Miles Hinton at right tackle last year. Now he's going to left. And, that dreaded P word, potential. And is he going to reach it? So I've heard he's been banged up maybe a little bit. Gio Ohadi maybe banged up a little bit. Josh Preeb is really kind of the guy. And he was the third big team, all Big Ten guy last year. So let's not just pretend that he's not a good player, right? Just because he wasn't here last year. Look at Drake Nugent. Look at Olu Oluwatimi the year before him. So I think that Preeb is going to be almost like the anchor of this line. I think your question marks are center and then the tackle positions. I love the fact that you're going to have a couple of really good guards in there, and anxious to see how the rest of it plays out. To me, that's, what, these guys, again, they're going against the best defensive line in the country. So they're getting an education here, and it's going to get easier for them when they play in games because they are playing against guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, who nobody can move the ball on. Frankly, those guys proved it all last year that they were probably the best interior line in college football, and they're back for another year and they're going to be better than ever. So I'm anxious to see as well how the receivers do and how patient some of these guys are. What worries me is if they don't get a quarterback, are these guys going to stick around? Like you said, Clay, if it's going to be a guy, if they're going to catch 300 yards in passes, they can go out to Oregon. For example, say Oregon comes to Colston Loveland and says, we're going to throw you a ton of balls. Do you have a quarterback that can get you the ball? That worries me a little bit. So let's see what happens. And that and NIL money also concerns me. Promises, bills are coming due, fellas. I've talked to a couple parents who have said, look, we're still waiting on our money. Promises are made. They are going to have to pay these guys if they want to keep them here.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things we know, too, is it just feels like, and every guy just about that we've talked to this spring has been asked this, what are the differences between practice or just the program in general under Jim Harbaugh and under Sherrone Moore? And it's very similar. from what everybody has said. And as TJ Guy said today, it's early. So, they'll find out more differences as time goes along. But right now, and I thought Angelique Shangelis asked a great question too. It's like, last year you guys were motivated by the TCU loss. What is kind of motivating you and fueling you right now? And they said it's upholding the standard that we've already set as 15-0 national champions. And that's motivation enough. So it sounds like it's been competitive. In listening to Josh Preeb talk about the differences between Northwestern and Michigan was really fascinating. He said it's kind of like a whole different level in terms of the physicality, the competition, the overall intensity, the length of practices. So it sounds like that hasn't changed, because when Jim Harbaugh came in that first spring in 2015, it was like, we're not meeting. We're doing 4 hours on the practice field. However many hours we get, we're going to be on the field. You get better at football by playing football. I'm sure they kind of scaled that down a little bit throughout his tenure, but they still spend a lot more time on the field than most of these other teams. It feels like operationally, from what guys have said, it's very similar to what the program was under Jim Harbaugh, which, makes you feel, confident about the future. Also, clearly they're still going to have to coach well, and players are going to have to play well. They're going to have to get talent in there. Like, you can't just make it a carbon copy and expect the results to be the same. But right now, when you do have a lot of the same guys around, I think that can be something that they carry forward. So I think that's something that we know through 10 practices is the culture is very similar. The operation's very similar. And we found out a new drill today, the Quest to Atlanta drill. Of course, national championship game in Atlanta, January 20th, 2025. Get your plane tickets now. Get your hotel reservations now, because Michigan, and anytime they've come out with any of these drills, the Beat Ohio drill, the Beat Georgia drill that had to be changed to the Beat Bama drill because Georgia couldn't beat Bama in Atlanta, coincidentally. They've checked those boxes off and beaten those teams. They haven't lost to Ohio State ever since they implemented that drill. So the Quest to Atlanta drill is 11 on 11, good on good, heavy personnel, stacked box, run the ball, pretty much the Beat Georgia and Bama drill. So they're coming for it. They got their sights set on Atlanta.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball now. And I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is, we're going to cover an NFL draft here in a few weeks where Michigan has a legitimate chance to set this record of 16 guys selected, and obviously comes from both sides of the ball. But you go through each defensive position group, and, Mason Graham, Kenneth Graham, both of those guys could be first-round picks next year. Will Johnson, that's a guy who I think is easily a first-round pick next year, assuming good health. At linebacker, you've got, Ernest Hausman. I think he's a future NFL guy. Jayshawn Barham's a future NFL guy. You've got two experienced safeties that, Quentin Johnson was going to give the NFL draft a shot and didn't quite have that interest, but you would think a 6th year at Michigan probably puts him into the mix for that. Makari Page certainly could have been in the mix for that. And then Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore could also be guys that, have Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor in the draft this year. They combined for 11 sacks. Those two guys, I'll say somewhat quietly, combined for 10.5 last year. So bigger roles from them could make them NFL draft picks. And to me, we're talking about, I think what made Michigan's defense historic last year was, one, the fact that they were able to place so many guys because of the way that the schedule started, and Jesse Minter did a great job cultivating that depth. And there are a little more, a few more questions about depth this time around. But, when you're talking about a defense that could have, let's just say, as many as 3 or 4 first-round picks on it, that's when you do start to maybe, when they talk about wanting to be better than last year. Again, that bar was set so high, but when you have that level of talent, I'm not putting it past them to be able to do that.
And everybody, and part of it's going to depend on how much the offense moves the ball, right? You got to play complementary football. If they're on the field all the time, they can get tired, especially if they don't have the depth that they had last year that you just talked about, Anthony. So that's going to be something to watch. I like TJ Guy a lot. Looks pretty good. From everything we've heard on the edge, he's going to be one of probably the third guy. And to me, the linebackers, though, we'll have a report up on this tomorrow, but the linebackers have been one of the pleasant surprises of the spring. So extremely athletic. This whole defense is extremely athletic. You're going to have to find another corner, right? We've talked about DJ Waller. He's bigger. He's a strider. You talk about Will Johnson, though, locking down half the field. And Wink Martindale, Michigan's defensive coordinator, there's a reason he's smiling all the time, fellas. Look at what he inherited, especially up front, man, with Graham and Grant. And I said about Graham the first time I saw him, this guy is the best true freshman at this point in his career that I've ever seen. And I said that throughout his first year. Last year, best sophomore I've seen. I expect he'll be the best junior and that he's going to elevate his game. So it's only going to be better. I think you're right, Anthony. So the big question again is the depth. Who's that third linebacker? Jimmy Rolder? Is he going to be able to step up? Somebody's going to have to. Is that other corner going to be able to play like Josh Wallace played last year? That's going to be a big question mark. Wallace was one of the underrated players on that team, fellas. I went back and watched a lot of games, and everybody remembers the one or two that he got beat on. That guy was around the ball all the time. So, and the way the safeties are playing is encouraging. We're going to have a little note on Zeke Berry tomorrow as well. So, to me, I expect those guys to dominate, not just the Michigan team in practice, obviously the offense that they're going against on a daily basis, but I think they're going to be really, really good. Going to be one of the best defenses in the country. Again, it's about protecting them and making sure they're not on the field all the time.
Yeah, the Rod Moore injury obviously hurts, but I think to your point, AB, is there are kind of a couple guys at each level of the defense at least that you can really trust and that have played a lot of football here and have played a lot of good football. I mean, just on the defensive line, you have Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore on the edges, and then the two big boys on the interior, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And it leaves you wondering, Derek Moore was talking about some play last week that Mason Graham made that he didn't want to talk about and give away too much, but he said it was incredible. It was one of the craziest things he's ever seen. I'm thinking, what the hell did this guy do? But these guys are, going to come into their own, I think, as juniors and really be the strength of the defense. Like you said, Chris, I mean, the depth definitely isn't what it was last year because all those, KG didn't start last year. Josiah didn't start last year. Either did Derek Moore. Ernest Hausman was the third linebacker. So you kind of need those other guys to step up into the depth positions. But you have to at least a couple guys at every level. And, even Josh Preeb talking about it. He said, I've played a lot of great interior defensive linemen in the Big Ten and around the country, during his time at Northwestern. He said, you'd have a great guy, some D-lines would have one great guy, but now to have two on the interior, it's incredibly tough to deal with. So I think it starts up front for this defense, and then you got the Will Johnsons of the world on the back end, and got to fill some holes and have guys step into bigger roles this year. But there's a lot of talent on that side.